Hello, officially, and welcome to our complimentary online lunch event brought to you by Matchboard in partnership with Customer Science and Automation Anywhere. This event is entitled How to Transform Your Customer Operations with RPA and a Digital Workforce, and will run for around 1 hour and 15 minutes. During this time, we hope to spark your interest around the potential to positively transform your customer operations with robotic process automation. We'll have a few short presentations followed by audience Q&A. So think of your questions as we go along and feel free to make use of the chat functionality. Also, very important and very exciting, we'll be giving away a bottle of champagne to the person who asks the most interesting question during Q&A, as judged by our esteemed sponsor. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Sharon Melamed, Managing Director of Matchboard, and I'll shortly introduce our first speaker. Before I do, some quick housekeeping. Firstly, we'll be recording this session, and just so you don't need to take too many notes, we'll be sending you a link to the recording. Secondly, if you have internet issues, you can always use your mobile hotspot or dial in on your phone. The passcode is in the calendar invitation. Finally, could I ask you just to go on mute until question time to prevent outside noise for our speakers? And now to our first speaker, Matt Green. Matt is Director, Intelligent Automation at Customer Science, a consultancy specializing in CX and customer operations and all the technologies that wrap around them. Matt made the intelligent choice to relocate from the UK to Sydney at the height of the pandemic last year. His claim to fame, which is quite an achievement, is that he spent the past 20 years or so delivering literally hundreds of millions of dollars in savings for his employers and clients. So over to you, Matt.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Sharon. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're all well. I couldn't say hello to everyone individually as they joined, but it's nice to see you all. So yes, as Sharon mentions, I'm going to be taking you through what a digital worker is and also what RPA is. So first off, the RPA forms part of a digital worker. The digital workforce as itself / digital worker contains lots of different parts. You know, they can do most of what a human can do. They can read, write, learn, listen, watch, calculate, report, analyze, pretty much anything you can think of that's software based. I mean, if you want to go outside of software, that's not today, but feel free to talk to me about that as well. We're going to be focusing on robotic process automation, or RPA. For those of you who don't know what it is, it does exactly what it says on the tin. It's a robot that processes the same way a human would do. So it interacts with software and allows it to talk across all the different pieces of software and automate the end-to-end process that a human would normally sit around doing and spending most of their time on. So RPA in general, it's been around as a term for about 6 years now. So it's coined back in sort of 2015, some would say 2013, but effectively it's been around in several forms before then. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the lead up to RPA as well as RPA. So RPA or automation as it was is RPA V1, which is where you had teams of people sat around doing their day-to-day job and saying, hey, can we automate any of this? And this is where you get all these legacy automations where people have done things in Excel and VBA that you click a button, it goes, and you ask somebody, what does it actually do? And nobody actually knows what it does. Nobody knows how to fix it when it breaks, and it creates all sorts of issues. In short, there's no sort of control for it. There's no governance. People just try to do things because, quite frankly, they don't have the support of IT to be able to do the sort of things that they want, because IT are spending their time on more strategic things and looking at how they can actually help the business in the long run, as opposed to delivering those point fixes. Moving on sort of like to the next generation. So as you come to like 2010, you've got a lot more people coming around that are a bit more technically aware. Digital's starting to become a thing. So people are wanting to be able to self-service. They're not wanting to talk to people on the phone. They're wanting to be able to just go to the website and click a button to get that letter, as opposed to going down to the branch or having to sit and wait for half an hour on the phone to actually get through to somebody and hope they understand what they want. in Santander, we looked at this in quite a lot of detail. So we'd been automating things all the way from GE through to Santander, and we started to sort of like realize how big this was becoming, especially when we got a senior stakeholder buying in and wanting us to do it properly. So one of the big wins that we had was we went onto a fraud area, and we identified that, hey, look, we can help you with identifying these suspicious transactions and feeding them through into your other systems. At the time, we had 40 FTE doing that sort of work. We did something in the space of 2 weeks in sort of like our in-between cycles that we gave him, and that allowed him to sort of half his workforce, free them up onto other things. So I think he moved them all to fraud investigations. So they had a much better handle on the actual fraud investigation piece and a better return from it. But we took that sort of robotic aspect away from that human and allowed them to do what they're actually employed to do, as opposed to just moving data from one place to another. And you can see that in the diagram here on screen, we've moved digital one place forward. So instead of it being thought of as the very last thing and nice to have, let's plug it in if we can do, it's starting to be thought of as a bit more of a, hey, can we do anything digitally before we actually build out this process through humans? I was at Santander for 8 years, I think it was. We automated pretty much everything in that space of time. So that's from around 2008 to 2016 to 2017. And we automated everything from sort of account opening right through to the collections, the closure process, and the probate process. So everything in between, payments, subject access requests, you name it, we automated it. And these sort of things were core to the business value. You know, as we're fixing the problems that the area leaders had that they couldn't get fixed right. And if they did, they would take them a long time and maybe never get delivered. We did a payments end-to-end process, and it quickly got discovered by IT that, hey, these guys are delivering all these automations. They had a quick look at it. I say quick, they spent 6 months. They came in and analyzed what we had done. We built it all in the space of 4 months. It was live. They came in, they had a look at it over the space of 6 months and decided, hey, they couldn't do it. And at that point, we got the relationship with IT and were able to move forward and actually progress that digital journey even more. Sorry, I think there's somebody not on mute. Can we mute these guys? Sorry about that, guys. And then that moves us on to sort of RPA 3, which is where RPA became known as a thing. So pre this, there's RPA existed in various different shapes and forms. You know, as I mentioned, developers in areas, people sitting down automating Excel. There's also UAT software. So UAT software was there to basically make repetitive tasks easy for the UAT teams. And then that sort of is where RPA as an actual tool started from. In 2015, we got to a point where these tools were actually doing what they said they could. So before then, they'd been around, but you looked at them and they weren't very good. They weren't very strong. They weren't scalable. They were very restrictive in what they could and couldn't do. When we get to 2015, they've got a lot more functionality. They're a lot more flexible. They are more scalable. You know, you could at this point you could scale quite happily up to 1,000 robots. You know, without any massive concerns, as long as you've got the infrastructure for it. But there's also the advent of attended robots. So instead of having robots in the background that sort of like did the work that a human used to do, it was a case of, hey, look, we can help the humans with robots. And that was, I'll show you a use case for this in a minute, but it was basically giving somebody on a call center floor, for example, a button that they could click. And instead of them having to go across numerous different systems to pull back security information, it just automatically pop it up in front of them, meaning they could focus most of their time on customers. There's lots of those sort of processes. As we get to modern day, you know, there's a few clients popping up on the right hand side that I can't see because of my videos, but these are the clients that I've been working with sort of like through these different phases over in Europe. UBS is a great example. These guys now have, I think they're up to about 900 bots or something, somewhere around there. They're developing around 50 bots a month, or they were when I last spoke to them. And they have done a hell of a lot. Another great example from down here would be ANZ. ANZ Bank have, I think the last I heard, they'd automated something like 20% of their overall workload. And these guys are utilizing all of these different parts that have come up over the period of time. So they're using the automation, they're using chatbots, they've got self-healing governance in place, auto creation. You know, if they've got peaks and troughs, they've got things that automatically scale up and automatically scale down. It's fantastic. And where we're starting to look at now as a group, customer science, automation anywhere on our customers, we're starting to look at what the future is going to look like. So how do we take advantage of the new AI? You know, AI has been around for a little while and everyone's got a different opinion of what AI is, but there's some known things. You know, it's great at preemptive analytics. It's great at looking at pictures and working out what they are. So it's great for insurance quotations, for example. It's great at reading documents and actually making sense of what they are. So overall, you know, the period that we've gone from early 2000 to now, the technology has come on exponentially, and it will continue to do so. So where we are now is probably, we'll be saying, how big a jump we've made in the next 3 years. Moving on from that, in terms of where we were in Europe and Americas, we're normally around 4. I've put it at 3 because it's sort of like, depending on what company you are, depends on how much effort you put into it. But on the general terms, 3.5 to 4 is about where Europe sits at the moment. From what I've seen in the market down here, it seems that you guys down here are slightly behind us. Some companies are the exceptions to the rule. So Commonwealth Bank, for an example, or Optus is also a very good example of people who have really taken this on at a senior level and have rolled it out across their business as a strategy, as opposed to using it as a tactical fix. But overall, I think overall from what I'm seeing down here, it's slightly behind the rest of the world. And that's one of the main reasons I came down here, is because I want to be able to help people to get up to that same level. This is the process I mentioned very quickly. I'm going to finish in a second, but this is a process that looks at an end-to-end call, as in one of our clients, can't name them, but effectively the overall call took about 240 seconds. Most of the time was actually spent with the customer, not really speaking to the customer, because the time was focusing on the systems, getting the information and moving it around. We introduced the robot. It reduced that call time down to 120 seconds and allowed the agents to focus completely on that customer, meaning that the customer felt a lot more engaged. We also had a robot in place that would suggest better things for the customer based on what they pulled from the system. So we were able to give them extra value as well. Overall, much better customer journey, much better customer experience, and a better agent experience as well. And with that, I'm going to hand back over to Sharon.
Thank you, Matt. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce Todd Gossard, who is the dynamic CEO of Customer Science. Todd also has a special guest with him, and that is Jamie Bartholomew, Head of Business Improvement and Intelligent Automation at Smart Group, whose flagship brand Smart Salary, some of you may know. And so together, they're going to share their learnings across many successful RPA implementations. Take it away, Todd.
Thanks, Sharon, and thanks everybody for joining us today. I appreciate it. We're delighted to be able to present to you a couple of case studies. I'm going to present 2. The first one's just about how RPA can help you scale your centres or your services. And the second one's a proactive service, which I quite like, something that Anglicare did in order to deliver a service that they otherwise couldn't have because of the costs associated with it. Matt, if you can click through, we'll go to the first case study. Oh, we missed one. Keep going. Yeah, so the Australian government, the Australian Digital Health Agency, it's now almost 2 years ago, they had a challenge when they were opting out for the digital health record. And when they needed to do that, there was a real spike in volume because there was a deadline for that opt-out. So customers calling through right on that deadline as they left at the last minute. The forecast was approximately 100 times the normal volume. Matt, do you want to click? So we built a solution to try and manage for that. That was a combination of people, adding 70 odd people, adding rapid process and adding automation. The automation and the process, that was only to be triggered should we need them. And I'll share a little bit about the automation here on the right-hand side. So for Australian Digital Health Records, as a customer's calling through to opt out, They'd call through the phone system and punch in their Medicare record. As that was entered, it would push through into a unified desktop, which was basically a HTML form. The robot would then speak back to a number of databases, drag the information back through, and provide it to the agent. So the agent could then explain to the customer and verify their identity and explain what the next steps were. Then the agent just needed to click a button and the robot would go ahead and execute the opt-out. The robot would also just check that it all went through fine. If it didn't, it would provide a next step that the agent could then explain to the customer and then click another button to execute the next step. So it's kind of quite a holistic solution that allowed agents to really rapidly work through an inquiry and dragged out a whole heap of activities that they otherwise would have done themselves. Matt, do you want to click 2 more? So this solution, oh, sorry, go back one. This solution was delivered within 6 weeks. It did handle an extra 60 times volume of inquiries. They didn't quite get to the 100 times that they'd forecast. And the benefits you can see down the bottom was that they basically got a 35% workload reduction. It didn't mean they got the full benefit of that and their capacity for their headcount. So they got about a 30% capacity benefit. Definitely saved the taxpayers millions of dollars as a result, not having to employ an additional 70 people. And there was no customer complaints recorded to ADHA nor bad press wrapped up into a platform. So they now have a digital workforce platform, including the IVAR, the unified desktop and the robot that they can scale up as they need. So that's that one. The next one's around Anglicare. So Anglicare provides at-home services. And essentially what that means is a carer will go out to somebody's home and provide services and support to allow them to stay there where they otherwise couldn't. It also consists of a centralised contact centre and a scheduling centre. Now, what I like about this solution is it was a proactive solution. Previously, if a scheduled carer was on their way out to visit the home and they weren't on time, then you know, as a vulnerable Australian who was waiting for that carer, they'd often make a call into the call centre and generate volume, and that would then be pushed out to schedulers who would then have to make proactive calls out to multiple stakeholders, try and work out what's going on and reschedule things, etc. What I like about the process for Anglicare is they did 2 things well. The first is you can see the robot they put right up front, and they proactively managed the inquiry by checking a database if the scheduler was on time, sending messages out to the scheduler to check they would be okay, managing that schedule if there was a problem, and escalating it if there was an issue as well, so that people were made aware and the customer was notified as well. So it's a nice way to kind of proactively improve customer experience. And the second part of this one is that the robot then went ahead, and you can see all the crossed out lines. You don't have to read them, but the point is that the robot went ahead and did a number of activities that would otherwise be done by people. So reduce the workload and time, and provided basically better care to people at home. Matt, if you click again, the benefits, really they reduced 1 staff member out of 35 as a result of this activity. 73% handle time reduction for these inquiry types. And then because of this, whilst it doesn't look like a small benefit, because it created capacity, it gave them quite a big increase in improvement in abandonment rate. And for them, knowing that their carers were safe meant that there was a reduction in risk, and in their assessment, they reduced risk to some of their carers by about 50%. That's it. I might hand over to Jamie to talk about his Lessons Learnt Smart group.
Thank you, Todd. Hi, everybody. So I'm Jamie, and I head up the business improvement and automation team at Smart Group. And I guess what I'll be going through today over the next 10 minutes or so is just a bit of an overview of some of the experiences I've had with deploying robotic process automation. And I can reference a couple of different places that I've been, because I've actually only been at Smart Group for 12 months. And previously I was at MP Capital, we had a very similar role, and set up an automation team there back in 2015. So a few different experiences to draw on, but just as some context so that you're aware of Smart Group and what the environment's like here. If you're not aware of Smart Group as an organization, we basically offer employee benefits and administration services to clients. Those are kind of primarily within the salary packaging and the novated leasing and fleet management areas. So those are we basically work with a number of different clients and then engage with their employees to try and offer them employee benefits. In terms of size as an organization, we're around about 700, 750 employees. So kind of firmly in that small to medium enterprise, but having grown pretty swiftly over the last few years. And again, just to give some kind of idea of size and scale, we have around about 65,000 novated leases under our management and 360,000 different packages. So it's a pretty sizable player in this area. But to get onto our intelligent automation journey at Smart Group, it started around about 5 years ago. And as I mentioned, I only joined 12 months ago. So I've kind of come in at the tail end where they were a good 3.5, 4 years into their journey. So the way they started here, they had quite a solid and standardized use case. So something of some real value where they went through a process of looking across the different tasks that go on and look for something, firstly, actually doable, not going over, trying to overachieve, something doable that people knew about and had some value to the execs and then to our customers. When they went through that as a use case and they had something pretty well embedded, they actually embarked on this journey where they engaged a partner vendor, a delivery partner that works alongside the main vendor, Automation Anywhere. So the strategy here was really around, okay, we've done something that's showing some clear value. How do we now scale this really quickly? How do we deliver a significant transformation? So we worked with a delivery partner, and over the next 3 or so years, we quickly ramped up to around about 50 digital workers or 50 bots. In terms of the main benefits, I'd say that we've seen, bots or digital workers have actually become a real key part of Smart Group. I think there's actually been, so some of the key wins have actually been things that we perhaps didn't expect to see. We haven't actually gone through a process of having to downsize the organization. So it hasn't been we've automated loads of jobs and we've had to do mass redundancies or anything like that. What we've actually found is that as we've scaled up our digital workers, we've actually just been able to achieve more. So perhaps we, with natural attrition or as the business expands, we actually just don't have to hire as many people. But probably more than anything, there's actually a lot more flexibility across the workforce. Like with a lot of organizations, we're firmly on a digital transformation for the next few years. And what we're actually seeing is we can free up people from some of the day-to-day stuff and actually get those people that know the processes and know the business to support that transformation. So there's a real key win in that. We're just going into a few other benefits, and I'll just pick on a few of these. One thing that we've really noticed is some employee satisfaction. So the type of company that we are, we have some severe peaks in workload throughout the year. One being one that's just actually passed, literally just passed, which is the end of FBT year. So what we end up with is towards the end of FBT year, lots of claims getting submitted. All of a sudden you have operational teams trying to process claims. And these are all really, really standardized things. Yes, there's exceptions in them, but the vast majority of stuff is just a standard case. What we've actually been able to do is focus on a few of those key tasks and actually take away a lot of the frustrating and manual stuff. So during the peak times of the year, we're actually able to scale up the bots that are working on a particular task. And we've actually been able to reduce the overtime that people are having to work, or the late nights that people might have to work and maybe don't get rewarded for. And we've actually just seen, without actually any quantitative metrics around this, we have actually seen a general positive uptick in the way our employees are around those peak times a year. As I mentioned, I also head up the business improvement team. So that's kind of a classic process improvement type team. And one of the key things I see there is I'm a real firm believer in RPA being a part of a wider improvement team. To me, it's all about standardizing and improving a process to the point you mature it so much that you can actually automate it. And one of the things I've seen with a kind of continuous improvement lens is we're actually in a position where going through an automation process, by definition, you are standardizing, you are documenting, and then you get to a point where once you've automated, it's actually quite simple to continuously improve that process. You get to a point where you have fewer exceptions, and it's a lot easier to make those jumps and kind of continuously improve. Another area would be in the accuracy that we've seen some benefits. So obviously, once you've got a bot up and running and you've coded it to do a specific task, it can't deviate from those tasks. It will look for the things it's looking for, and it will perform exactly as you've coded it. So there's a real benefit here in that you can get your audit teams to actually audit a process, and then you can prove by having some good code management principles. Once that's locked away and no one can touch it, you've actually got a process that nobody can actually deviate from. So in terms of accuracy, we've actually brought risk profiles down on some certain key processes. We can prove that we can deliver to a black and white standard. And then another one I'd add in is actually some customer experience benefits. So we've actually been able to offer some additional services to customers within our novated leasing business that previously we would have struggled to offer because it would have just required an army of people to do it. So these kind of additional services are in the regio renewals, in the maintenance, and a lot of the, again, standardized but necessary and mandatory things that go with actually owning a vehicle. So I say that those services would have been very labor intensive, but we've actually just been able to spin up a few bots. And I probably have made that sound a little bit easier than it was. It was 6 to 8 weeks work to get there, but spin up a few bots to actually be able to offer some of those services to our customers and take some of those kind of manual and laborious processes away from them and offer them a bit more value. So that's an overview of some of the benefits. What I'll try and do now is just quickly go through some key lessons, and I'll try not to labor too many of these points. What I'll actually do is just try and give a quick summary. So I've listed a few on here, but the first one would be around being able to reuse code. So when you're first starting out on an RPA journey, it's kind of very simple to just think about an isolated process. But you very quickly do need to be starting to think of widening the scope of what you're doing and making sure stuff's reusable. The reason I mention that is I've definitely fallen into the trap before when we first did this at MP Capital, where we had 3 developers, they're all working on the same system. I just let them go and code the way I think's best. We end up with 3 sets of code that are effectively log into a system, create a new case. Sounds really obvious, but it wasn't at the time. As soon as the system changes, you've got 3 times the maintenance that you need to do. So there's a real kind of design element there in thinking, how do we make this reusable? Second key one is truly thinking of the end-to-end process. We quite often think we're looking at an end-to-end, but we're actually ignoring downstream and upstream stakeholders. So again, a trap I've fallen into here is we've gone into what we think is the end-to-end, made a huge difference to a particular team, and all of a sudden they can get through 500 cases or whatever it might be in half the time that they used to. But actually, when we've handed that off to the next person in the chain, they're not ready for it. And all we've done is doubled their workload, and the net benefit to the organization is nothing. We've just moved the bottleneck further along the chain. So you kind of need to have that look at the end to end. Another point would be to say that scaling isn't easy. Getting some quick runs on the board when you've got no automation is very easy. But then actually thinking, how do we do this in a way that really supports the organization and is going to be a strategic move, is where you really need to start thinking. And to me, the point here is as simple as everyone thinks we just need to involve IT. It's a lot wider than that. You need to involve IT. They're absolutely a key stakeholder, but you need to have business support. You need to have HR support, operations support. There's lots of key people that need to come together. And probably the summary there is developing a center of excellence is definitely something that starts giving the governance and the platform for scale. Final few points, I'd say there's a huge one around change management. Even the last few days, and so this is change and kind of ongoing management. I've had a few instances where people are coming to us saying, what's happening with the workload of this bot? And I kind of have to say, well, you know what, you need to think of this differently. This isn't a bot that my team owns from a workload perspective. We're kind of providing you the infrastructure and the expertise, but people in the business need to start seeing these bots as digital workers. So you build this into a workforce plan of human workers and digital workers. It's as simple as that, so that when you do have cases coming in, it still needs to be on those team leaders to be managing their resources effectively and managing the workload. This doesn't work from a scale perspective if you think in the future that you have one central team that owns absolutely everything. It's kind of a crazy way of doing things. So having that change management and an ongoing management discussion up front is absolutely crucial. One point I think that's really important is in your initial kind of proof of concept or pilot, whatever you're working on, that yes, you want to start with something relatively small, something that you can turn around pretty quickly to show the value. But it needs to be something representative. You've got to really strike a balance of, you don't want to automate something that's so small that no one really cares. So you want to look for that opportunity that is going to be relatively easy to do, relatively straightforward, but is going to really make the business sit up and take notice and start thinking about what next. And the final one I'd put in there is just a more general comment around interactions with technology teams and maybe involvement in digital transformations, because all of a sudden the growth in RPA has suddenly really shone a light on the kind of traditional way of doing things within IT, the mentality of needing to build everything into super strategic systems and getting rid of legacy systems. And whilst I take the point there, and I wouldn't argue against that as a kind of best case approach, there's absolutely a conversation to be had about trying to understand where the boundaries are within a digital transformation, so that RPA and other automation technologies are kind of factored in as part of that transformation. There's kind of, for me, a conversation to be had around why should we wait 3 years to deliver something which probably by the end of it is going to be out of date and starting to push legacy, rather than look for those opportunities where we could actually use automation. There's even a potential to actually use RPA as a short to medium term to help you deliver on the longer term strategic and free up some of those people to help you work through that. But I think with that one, it's more around having that conversation up front, defining who's going to do what and looking for those use cases. So that's all I was going to go through today. I think I'm pretty much at time. So I think I'll be handing back over to Sharon now.
Yes, thank you so much, Jamie, and thank you, Todd. We did skip over a poll that we're going to launch now, just a one question poll for the audience, which hopefully you can see on your screen now. Let's see where you are on your automation journey. If everybody could give us some insight there. And Matt, I don't know if you want to unmute and make any comments on the results we're seeing come through.
Yeah, sure. Give it 30 seconds, just let them all come through. At the moment, I can see about 14. It's rapidly going up though. rapidly going up. And I'll tell you what, from what I can see at the moment, this mirrors what my take was from the slide around where Australia sits. As it stands, over 50% of the people on this call are just investigating RPA. They haven't actually started on the journey. And more interestingly, there's 19% that just aren't using it. So I think this is coming to a close. There's just 7 people, and I assume that's us lot that haven't actually answered. So as it stands, there's 1 person on the call who's successfully scaled. They've got continuous improvement and continuous development in place, and they've got a fully digital workforce, which is fantastic. I'd love to find out a bit more about who that is and come and see you guys and see this in action. In terms of other bits and pieces on here, the main one being 52% just are still in proof of concept. So can everybody see this now, or am I? Yeah, everyone can see it. Fantastic. So yeah, the proof of concept stage is a key one. As Jamie says, sort of you want to prototype small. So find a small, highly visible process that's going to deliver some value. And then once you've proved it, go big, go fast. And what you'll see is that snowball effect that will happen. So just like it did in Santander, you know, you go in one process, and then all of a sudden, before you know it, that one process becomes 100 processes. So thank you very much for everyone into answering the polls.
Thank you, Matt. And we have one last short presentation from Mike McCornock, who is the Regional Vice President at Automation Anywhere. So Matt, maybe skip to the next slide. Oh.
Thanks, Sharon. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'll just try and close that slide down. So that was actually me, Matt, that answered that we have a full digital workforce. As a digital workforce company, I think we have about 2,000 employees globally, but we also have several hundred digital workers spread right through our back office, front office. You know, they're prevalent in our operating model. But thanks everyone for attending today, and I'm going to talk for about 10 minutes. So I guess I want to give you a little bit of context of the problem statement we're seeing consistently out there, and talk to you a bit more about our platform and the add value. But I think one thing we constantly hear today is around digital transformation. But to me, I'm not sure that there's ever a nirvana there. You don't suddenly arrive at an enterprise that's digitally complete. You know, change is constant. So it's really a question of how you future-proof your organization with RPA. What we're seeing with many organizations today, that they're on this journey, and in their front office, they have many modern systems replacing legacy platforms. And Matt, if you wouldn't mind just building out the slide. We see products like Salesforce, Zendesk, Dynamics. The companies are going through transformation journey, and they're transforming things like sales and customer experience in the front office. And similarly, in the back office, we're seeing many modern platforms being introduced. Companies like Workday are growing at enormous rates. Oracle are replatforming with SaaS, IBM, SAP. There's a host of companies out there. And similarly with employee productivity tools, particularly with COVID, we've seen this huge rise with Zoom and these collaboration tools. And they've become an important part of how work gets done. The challenge with this is that we end up with this, even in companies that are transforming, we still have this fractured applications landscape. And this siloed systems also create siloed processes, which really hampers employee productivity, and it can really hamper customer experience as well. So what Automation Anywhere is doing, we're seamlessly connecting the front office with the back office. We're connecting these silos to, I guess, address these productivity bottlenecks that are impacting our ability to deliver business services efficiently, to deliver fantastic employee experiences, and so on. So if you could go to the next one, Matt. Now, Jamie, I want to come back to your point, because you made a really good point about RPA in the context of future-proofing your enterprise. So I'll talk a bit about that. So Automation Anywhere in the last couple of years, as part of this transformation, we really thought about, well, how do we become relevant long-term? How do we continue to add value and future-proof our platform so that we can stand the test of time as an RPA and intelligent workforce platform as companies transform with this constant and fast-paced change. So what we did, we rebuilt our platform from the ground up. We built a single platform, cloud-native, microservice-based architecture and enterprise-grade, really scalable cloud. And we did that for a number of reasons. Firstly, I think having a single platform, and I'm going to sort of break down some of this. So I'm not sure on the call how much anyone knows about Automation Anywhere, but I'll just give you a real quick feel for our platform. When you think about starting an automation program of work, it typically starts with looking at your processes. Where are your people spending most of the time? Where are those productivity roadblocks? The high volume, repetitive, mundane processes that in reality, bots can do that work. Free up your humans to do the things that humans do really well. Allow the bots to do the mundane stuff that takes time, but it has to be done. We have a product called Discovery Bot that does a lot of that work. You can put the Discovery Bot into a business user's environment, and it will start to record and document processes and start to showcase which are the right processes that are, low-hanging fruit for automation, get you started quickly. And in fact, this is really useful because one of the biggest impediments to, automation programs is the time it takes to, bring in third-party consulting firms that start to document processes and go through that work. The second part of our platform is what we call IQBot. I guess in a modern enterprise today, a large proportion of the data we deal with is unstructured in nature. So IQBot allows us to, process those documents. It could be applications, could be claims, invoices, process those documents, take that unstructured data, turn it into structured data, pass it across to the RPA, and then automate those processes. And then finally, we have analytics built into the platform. So if you think about a digital enterprise with digital processes and digital employees facilitating those processes for you, you still have SLAs. You still need to understand, well, what's my digital workforce doing? And more importantly, looking at the data, how do I drive continuous improvement and improve operations with that data? So we have insights built in. What we see with a complete platform is we're able to address a lot more processes within your organization, ultimately delivering more value. Now, of course, cloud in a modern digital world, cloud becomes all important. Our platform's cloud native, is microservices. That enables us to deliver continuous innovation seamlessly to you. We can still deliver it on-prem, but most of our customers now, over 70%, just consume as SaaS. Turn on a browser, start with one bot, scale to 1,000. And like any cloud platform, it's enterprise grade. We put that hard work into bank grade security and the ability to just scale seamlessly. Whether you're a small organization with a unique use case that's really going to free up some capacity, or you're a federal government department deploying thousands of bots. So, Matt, would you mind moving on to the next slide? Okay, so one of the latest innovations that we've delivered, and I'm really excited about, is what we call RE. It's the Automation Anywhere robotic interface. Essentially, it's a digital assistant for all your employees. So, if you think about your employees in a customer service context, you could free up 20% of their time daily by augmenting them with a bot. What kind of value would that deliver? Or if you're growing as an organization and looking to hire more people, Jamie talked about this before. You can scale seamlessly without having to hire so many more people because you're creating digital capacity. RE is essentially, and we spoke about this in some of the use cases Todd mentioned, it's a low-code environment that allows you to build forms on the fly, and then employees can just call bots in real time to sort of pull data from a multitude of those silos that we spoke about and call bots on demand. And I'll break that down in a real world context. If you could go to the next slide, Matt. So consider a traditional workflow here. An employee knowledge worker could get a request from within the business or a supplier, And that request might mean that they need to go into a multitude of different applications. They could be, legacy applications, custom-built applications, modern SaaS-based applications in the front or back office. And then, of course, the knowledge worker may then need to look up some data. They need to rekey data in a multitude of systems. They could be processing some documents, for example. They may need to then inform someone or kick off a process, approval process for a workflow. So it can be really, really time consuming, and it hampers productivity. Matt, if you just build out slightly more, but then consider that in the context of a customer experience where a customer calls in real time to someone in the service department, and you're doing this work whilst on the phone with a customer, and you're having to talk to them and facilitate this process. So that, there's a high probability that that customer is going to leave that interaction feeling dissatisfied. And we see this all the time. I mean, how often do you call up an organization and you're stuck on the phone and they go, "Oh, sorry, can we just put you on hold?" Or, "Oh, sorry, you've rung the wrong department. I'm just going to transfer you." "Or would you mind if we do a survey at the end?" And you've just wasted 20 minutes and you haven't got what you wanted. So this is where RE becomes really useful. So Matt, if you just go to that last slide quickly. So then if you think about RE, let's take, for example, myself. I get wine delivered every month from a wine company, and my wine hasn't arrived, and I'm irate because I want my red wine. It's Friday afternoon. But in that last example I spoke about, if I call one of the service agents to check on my order status, and that service agent, firstly, has to understand, well, who am I? So it might look me up in a CRM system, then go, "Oh, right, okay." Might then go into an order management system or an e-commerce system and look up my order. You then may have to go and check in the logistics system to find out, all right, where's my shipment? What's holding it up? I mean, that can take several minutes. Could take 5 minutes while I'm on hold. If you think about RE, if that service agent had a speed dial, like on your iPhone, you have your favorites for numbers, if he could call the bot to say, that bot automatically builds a form for him straight away. He calls the bots, they surface up my information. So it's Mike Cornock, he orders a box of red once a month. The logistics information is pulled up. And straight away in real time, he can say, "Hey, Mike, I'm so sorry. Our freight got delayed by 2 days, but look, here's what I'm going to do for you. I'm going to apply a credit to your account for the inconvenience, and then next month, have an extra bottle of wine on us. Really, really sorry. I'm applying that now. Your account's updated. Feel free to get this browser. Go and order yourself a nice extra bottle of red for next month." So in the context of a customer situation, if your service agents or your internal HR department or your finance department dealing with suppliers, if they have a speed dial of the top request coming in, they can just call the bot instantaneously. It will surface up the information. It will give them everything they need instantaneously. They can action that, then kick off another process, close the request. Your productivity and your ability to drive great employee, supplier, customer experiences is really significantly advanced. And we're seeing that this is starting to become all important. We have so many customers that, let's face it, their IT departments are massively constrained. They've got, budget constraints, people constraints, time constraints. These transformation agendas take a lot of time and money. So building a simple building a simple web form and then having APIs to connect to 4 or 5 systems becomes an IT project. If you just have a low-code environment that business user can run up instantaneously and go and call pre-built bots, it's running off a SaaS model. It scales easily. You've got the governance in place. It starts to become a really efficient way of driving, some serious productivity improvements in the business. Lastly, that point Jamie made, again, using this as a tool as part of a transformation agenda. RPA in automation doesn't necessarily trump APIs. If you've got large-scale processes where you want to build APIs, and that's going to give you the kind of STP between your front office and back office for a particular process, fantastic. But it's expensive, it takes time, it's labor intensive. this platform is fantastic for dealing with those smaller use cases where you can spin a browser up quickly, you can build a bot with a business user in days and have it in production, delivering value, in a week. And we see that consistently with our customers. So I could talk about this for a long time, but I'm conscious I'm going to go over time. So I will leave it there, but thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful, Mike. I'm going to ask Todd now to share with you how you could get started with your RPA journey. And I think he's got some exclusive offers up his sleeve as well. Todd.
Thank you. I'll just be brief. There's we've got I think the message I wanted to share with people is it's not a difficult process to get started, and it's pretty low risk. So it's a low investment. There's a guaranteed performance at each step, and you can really control the stage gate. So you can make sure you're getting a return on investment at each point. And you can see there's a 6-step process, which takes you all the way from a simple coffee meeting that costs you nothing to qualify, all the way through to scaling up and managed solution for RPA, and that can take days or weeks or months to get sort of complete, depending on the scale of what you want to do. So yeah, it's quite an easy process. That's all I wanted to sort of say for that one. And the exclusive offers, it's a bit of a thank you for the group who's attended today. And also, maybe these are the areas to just help you get started as well. So the first one's just a free half day. It allows you to present to your team, share a bit more about what RPA is, explore the business reality, and just check it's a tool that's right for you and your business. The second one I put in the middle is both a readiness plan and also a bit of a maturity assessment, because some people have started their journey and there's some challenges with their journey and they're looking to fix some of those issues. We see more of those today than we had, or there's been some skunk works jobs done. So this allows you to do a quick assessment over a couple of days. And we've just done a 50% off deal for that one that allows you to kick that off and get an assessment report at the end, which gives you, a business case to get you kicked off. And the last one is the services. So if you chose to move forward and work with us to assist you, then we'd be providing a 10% discount. And then you get the complete cycle that I showed you a moment ago, all the way through to manage and deploy. So they're the offerings for today, Sharon.
Okay, brilliant. Given that more than half the audience is at that proof of concept stage, I think that free offer is quite amazing. So Matt, could you close the screen? Because what we're going to do is move to audience Q&A. And so we can all start to see each other's faces. I would ask you to unmute yourself if you want to actually ask a question in person. Otherwise, you can definitely pop the questions in the chat room, and a reminder that Automation Anywhere will be selecting one question as the most interesting one to win the bottle of champagne prize. I can see that Mike Fisher has unmuted. Did you have a question, Mike? Oh, sorry. No,
Sharon,
he's not.
we got a few in the chat window already by the look of it.
Yes, sorry. That Mike is having a sound problem. Okay, so I'm going to read out some of the questions that have come through. And if I could just ask you, Mike, to start thinking about who might be our prize winner. So we have a question from Gabrielle, which is, with the reduction of FTE of automation, I suspect there needs to be FTE reinvestment into the continued maintenance. Do you have any cases to share that suggest for every FTE you save up front, you have to reinvest X to keep it going?
It's an interesting one. If you go way back when, it was a case of you would put an automation and you remove people. But that's 18 years ago. If you look at the more recent ways people are doing this, they're doing it to increase capacity, so it allows them to grow while keeping that same baseline. So there's a client we're working with the other day who was looking at potentially having to bring in an additional 13 FTE to cope with a merger that they were doing. We introduced automations that would basically remove that need. And in terms of that reinvestment piece, it's an interesting one. If you are removing FTE, the only time you're going to have to bring them back in is if you remove the bots. So in terms of what you're actually going to free up, yes, you do have to reinvest in your people that you're moving off their normal job and onto something else. But that's just the same as you would do if you're bringing new people into the business, having to train them up. So it allows you to get the best out of the people that you've already got in your business.
Okay, fantastic, Matt. We have an excellent question from Julie in New Zealand. Any insights on employee engagement as a result of introducing automation? I don't know, Todd, if you would like to unmute and take that one, or...
Yeah, I'm happy to. Actually, it's a bit counterintuitive. So my observation is very early in the piece, there's a little bit of unsettled discussion about it. There's sort of three camps of people we find. One's sort of going, oh my God, my job's lost. The other one's really excited about what it could mean for them, learning something new, and the other's kind of an ambivalent group that don't worry too much. But pretty quickly, once it's in place, satisfaction goes up quite a lot. Also, what happens is satisfaction of the team leaders goes up, which is also an interesting one, because they're no longer, the robots don't have to go through the HR process, right? So they're not worried about annual leave for robots or problems with robots and stuff like that. So there's a less for the team leader, I guess, to worry about the robot side of things and just focus on their people. So they get more time with their people and whatnot. But in general, it's good because you're taking away noise and ugly work that they don't want to do.
Yeah, it also helps drive the engagement with them, because you can go and sit in an area and they've suddenly got somebody who's listening to about the problems that they have on a day-to-day basis and telling you, oh, I've got this problem, how can we fix it? And it's kind of, yeah, we can fix that for you. So that they feel empowered, they're engaged, and as long as you approach this right from the off, you'll get people buzzing about it and being happy around robots coming in. And the other thing is, something I didn't mention on the other one, is the softwares that are in place now is easy to train people upon. You don't need to be a developer. It helps to have a logical mindset that you can actually look at a process and understand how it works. But in terms of actually being able to free up people from the first process you build and then take those people and actually train them on how to build bots as well, that's one of the key benefits of doing this sort of thing.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, a couple of things I've definitely seen in other organizations and how people have managed it. I think that the change management aspect that you mentioned there, Matt, is really huge. Like there is this fear factor that you're not going to get away from that. People, they read what's going on the internet, in the news, they hear about people losing their jobs. That's immediately what you think of. I think the reality is that there's a lot of jobs out there that still, if you take 100% of the tasks they do, you can't actually automate 100% of those things right now. And actually, it's a lot better for them to take out the stuff that is automatable, because by definition, it's probably going to be pretty repetitive and potentially pretty boring. And you take those away from them and actually allow them to focus on the rest of their job, which hopefully is a bit more fulfilling for them. So if you manage the change in the right way, absolutely there's a positive impact on employee engagement. There is the other way of going gung-ho and telling everyone they're going to lose their jobs and we're going on a downsize, which I have seen from somebody before, and that had the impact which I'm sure is pretty obvious to most people it would have.
Thank you, Jamie. Adrian has come up with, I guess, a controversial question, which I'm sure Mike Connock will be more than happy to address. He asks, so Adrian asks,
oh, sorry, go on, Sharon. I was thinking everyone could read this, but they probably can't.
Yeah, so he asks, is UiPath a better tool of trade? And I guess that's a great opportunity for Mike from Automation Anywhere to explain how Automation Anywhere is a differentiating product in the market for RPA.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, it's probably not going to win the champagne, Adrian. But look.
Sorry, I thought I'd give you a chance to extol the benefits.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. Look, the RPA market, there's probably three big vendors, right? If you look at all the analysts out there, it's ourselves and UiPath leading. So if you look at the design principles of RPA, it's all around making it more intuitive for business users so that organizations can scale. We talk about the citizen developer model. I've worked with major banks where they have a central COE, so you've got that governance and control. But until they move to a federated model where they allow departments to scale, they're not really getting the scale they want. They're not delivering enough bots at the velocity they want. So a lot of those design principles are the same, but the one key difference between us and UiPath is this, and that's why Google rates us the leader in this quadrant in terms of our platform. The reason being is that we are the only company that's re-architected completely to the cloud native, microservice-based architecture. And that's really important in terms of, we're also a platform approach. We're an integrated platform in a cloud native deployment world, a SaaS model. We're not a monolithic architecture. We're not a collection of different tools integrated together to work as one in a monolithic world. We've made the jump to a cloud native SaaS model. And that's hugely important. I spoke about future-proofing your enterprise architecture because I'd actually like to answer one of the other questions, if I could, Sharon, and I'll sort of lead to that. When you think about the future of your enterprise, RPA and intelligent automation, digital workers will continue to be part of that operating model. So you want to move away from old school architecture. It needs to be modern, it needs to be cloud, it needs to be SaaS, lower cost, faster time to value, lower cost of management, and so on. So I think that we've got a fundamentally different proposition now with our platform, and we're seeing that in the market. We're seeing huge growth in the SaaS model. But UiPath, great competitor, great product. Wouldn't say anything bad about them at all. They're just not cloud, right? But I really liked the question Steve asked, and I would like to answer that if I could. So Steve asked, is the future vision to engineer out the digital workers, or do you envisage them having a long-term tenure in their current tasks? I think that's a really, really good question. If you look at our organization, we got a lot of investment from the market in the last couple of years, just like the likes of UiPath. We got investment from companies like Workday, Workday Ventures, and Salesforce. And the reason being, these are ultra modern digital platforms, right? In terms of transforming your HR function or your finance or your front office for, sales, service, marketing, and so on. But both those companies invested in our platform because what they've now done is they've now built a whole host of digital workers that sit on top of their platform, and you can buy them from our bot store. They're free to deploy if you use our platform. So we use Workday. And we have digital workers helping onboard new employees, hire new employees. We have a whole host of digital workers that sit within Workday, facilitating the HR function and payroll function. We have a whole host of digital workers sitting in a Salesforce environment. So I think, in answer to your question, Steve, I think increasingly as companies digitize their operations and they integrate more of their modern digital platforms, as they gradually replace their legacy and move to cloud-based, SaaS-based deployments, I think the number of digital workers will probably diminish slightly because you'll have more straight-through processing and integration. Also, what we're seeing is that companies are trying to build RPA inherently into their platform. So if you have a finance worker, for example, well, why would you have a workforce, a traditional employee, to complete all of that work? If you could give some of it straight to a bot, fantastic. But I still think there's a huge market because the beauty of a platform like ours is that it sits across all those silos. If you're a one application vendor that's building some bots into your application, you're not necessarily collecting all the silos. And we're also seeing a sort of consolidation of the players because it's an ultra competitive market. So to keep up, you've got to be at the forefront. So I think digital workers are going to be part of an operating model for the foreseeable future. But as companies transform more and more and more, will it be as prevalent? I suspect it may diminish, but that's a long time away. We're still in this sort of hyper growth phase.
Yeah, and that's it. A lot of bots are rolled out as being a tactical fix, but they very quickly become strategic. So the payments one that I mentioned, that was meant to be tactical for a year, just while IT got enough time to actually get around to doing it. But then it turned out IT couldn't do it. So you had that instant saving across that year while IT were meant to be looking at it. And then instead of having missed out of it completely, you've got something there that is now strategic fix. And that's happens with quite a lot of bots, because people don't understand how quickly they go in and then how much value they deliver and how stable they are if they're built correctly. And it just gets adopted, and then it's like, oh, well, it works now, let's look at something else. So it's that whole sort of piece. But yeah, the majority do start as tactical. The people who start with the strategic view, ultimately they want to get bigger, faster and quicker.
The most successful customers I see are the customers that have a kit bag of solutions, and they look at the problem statement and they say, look, should we spend money on an IT project and deploy APIs and connect these systems and future-proof it, right? Or should we do a lower cost, faster solution, address the bottleneck, it will stand the test of time and move on? It's exactly what Jamie said. It's got to be, it doesn't have to be RPA for everything or APIs for everything. It's a mix of different solutions based on the problem statement and capacity.
There's an
just a quick one
question
to complement. Sorry, Matt, to complement your points. And this tenure in a process for a digital worker, we still treat them like a worker, so they will get retrained if the process needs to change, and they will be quality assured. They will be monitored and managed centrally. So it is still quite consistent with a person, just digital.
Yeah, I can see an interesting question there from Gabs that we can answer quite quickly, which is limitations of amount of data that can be handled. It really depends on what you want to do. So in terms of live streaming data, there's been stuff where we've worked with agencies, I think is the best way of putting it, with taking live data streamed from a drone. There's also one that's more in the press, if you were to Google it, where they're taking live analysis being fed from is it McLaren F1 car, I think it is. So they're working with real-time data for those two. So the answer to this one, is there a restriction? No, not really. Over and above what the technology can already do. So you've got a certain amount of throughput that you can have coming in, and then it's all around how lean your process is that's going to be analyzing and what you want to do with that data. So it can work as fast as the system can. If you want to throw a $1 million server at it, it'll do it like that. If you want to throw a normal desktop at it, it might do it a little bit slower.
Sure. I'm conscious of time, but a real quick example of that, like we did some work with McLaren for their Formula One team. And you think about Formula One cars when they're racing, it's all driven by data. There's those split-second decisions that are from the pit to the driver to basically change their race strategy to how they get that millisecond off at the end and get on the podium. And we massive volumes of data being processed by bots, and then AI embedded in that to drive decision making, so that the pit could drive faster decisions to the drivers to ultimately improve decisions and get them on the podium. So I think they really blew away the volumes of data there. There's no limitation.
Thank you, Mike. We actually have time for just, I think, one or possibly two questions. Mike Fisher at AIA has asked, are there certain attributes of processes that make them more or less of an opportunity for automation? And I actually thought Jamie or Todd might like to chip in here.
Yeah, sure. So there's probably a couple of different levels to answer this one. I guess there's some absolute basics of, can a process be automated? So obviously you need something that is standardized, has few exceptions, and you can actually define for a bot, because what you're effectively doing for a bot is giving it a set of instructions, telling it, when you get here, do this, when you get here, do this. If that landscape's forever changing, the bot's not going to be able to work. So there's kind of the base level of what can be automated. But then I think where the next level down is it actually depends on what you're trying to achieve. So I've worked on some different use cases where, for instance, we had a focus on increasing capacity, so reducing like FTE involvement on certain processes. So obviously to achieve that one, you then want to start looking at where they're standardized. You want to look at those high volume processes, the things that are happening all the time where you can make a real big impact. On the other hand, I've worked on some things which the drive isn't really around capacity, it's actually around accuracy. So for example, you work in, say, a finance space where you might actually only have a process that happens once a month during their month-end processes. And what you actually find there is that if you're only doing it once, you haven't got the high volume, so you might not increase capacity, but you might actually make the accuracy a lot better. So it might be something that's quite manual, lots of Excel work, dragging, dropping, people make mistakes, and those potentially have impacts on financial reports and statements and things. So I think for me, there's the base level, and then you've got what's your actual motivation for automating, because I think that's where it's going to depend.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I'll just add on to this that if you've got a broken system, the automation won't fix your broken system. It'll just make it worse, because instead of hitting it once every minute, it'll hit it 10 times a minute. And if it's broken and it doesn't work, automation won't fix it. So you're going to have to fix your systems first. What it will do is it'll be more error tolerant. So it can say, hey, there's an error here, and flag it up and wait for it and then retry it. But it won't fix broken systems. So if you've got a system that's sketchy and throws errors all the times, that's probably not a great system to automate.
Okay, very last question. And if I could just ask panelists to just give literally a 1 or 2 sentence answer. This is from Martin at MRI Now. My experience is IT often gets in the way of RPA. Larger companies have transformation officers to bridge this. Any advice for the SMEs where IT influence can be significant? Any advice?
I'll do the first one. It is surprising because it's now such a cloud-based technology. You can literally walk in and fire up RPA on somebody's desktop, and the IT team will look at it and go, "Oh, what do you mean? I don't need to change ports. I don't need to, I don't need this security change here. Other issues." So I think the history of RPA was really challenging, but it has shifted. So that's my 1 2 sentences.
Any other panelists, just a 1 or 2 sentence response? Any tips for people to deal with IT, troublesome IT?
I'll just echo what Todd said. There's no infrastructure you need internally. You don't need hardware. They don't need to do anything. You know, it's just a case of saying, hey, we're going to free up your time with this, and we're going to deliver value to our business area.
Perfect. Okay, I'm now going to ask Mike at Automation Anywhere to announce the winner of the bottle of champagne for the most interesting audience question. Mike.
It's a really difficult one, Sharon. There's a lot of great questions there, and I really appreciated Adrian's question as well. Look, I think to me it goes to Steve. Just looking at the future vision, is it around engineering out digital workforce, or is it here to stay? I think that's a really clever question, thinking about how this is going to be applied long term in companies' operating models around the world. So yeah, thanks, Steve. We'll have to get your details and get that champagne in the post.
Yes, absolutely. Congrats, Steve. I'll be in touch to arrange those bubbles. And so that brings our event to a close. I hope you enjoyed it. To everyone that attended, really appreciate that you gave up so much of your time today. We will be sending around a short survey to get everyone's thoughts. And I know that the customer science team remain available, of course, to engage with you further if you're interested, and their contact details will be shared on the survey. Wishing everyone a wonderful day ahead. Stay safe, stay well, and see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Sharon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for organising us. Thank you.
Okay.